There is a species of human being that vanished from the Earth more than 30,000 years ago. They were not us. They were not Neanderthals. They were something else, a separate kind of human, with their own bodies, their own minds, their own long story. For 100,000 years they lived and loved and buried their dead, across half a continent. And then they disappeared so completely that for most of modern history we had absolutely no idea they had ever existed. No skeletons in our museums, no name in our textbooks, a whole branch of humanity erased. But here is the part that should send a chill down your spine. They are not entirely gone. Because if your ancestors came from certain parts of the world, a piece of this lost species, this ghost, is inside your body right now. In your cells, in your blood, shaping how you breathe, how you fight off disease, maybe even how you survive. This is the story of the Denisovans, the hidden humans we only discovered by accident, from a single broken bone. And the astonishing thing scientists just did in the last few years to finally look one of them in the face. Welcome to Hidden History Uncovered, the channel that digs up the stories the textbooks left out. If you love the mysteries that rewrite everything you thought you knew about the human past, then do one thing right now. Subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications. Because what you are about to hear is one of the greatest detective stories in the history of science. A mystery solved not with shovels and maps, but with a fragment of a finger, a tooth, and the invisible code hidden inside them. This is the story of a lost kind of human, how we found them, what they left inside us, and the incredible moment, just recently, when a face finally emerged from the darkness. Stay with us to the end, because the final twist changes what it means to be human. Let's begin. Our story starts in the year 2008, deep in the mountains of southern Siberia, in a place called the Altai. Here, in a cool, dark cave overlooking a river valley, a team of Russian archaeologists was carefully sifting through layers of dirt that had been accumulating for tens of thousands of years. The cave was known as Denisova Cave, named, according to local legend, after a hermit named Denis who once sheltered there. Archaeologists had been digging in it for years. It was a good site, full of stone tools and animal bones, but nothing that seemed likely to shake the foundations of science. Then, in one of those layers, a worker found something almost absurdly small. A single fragment of bone, no bigger than a pebble. It was the tip of a pinky finger, and from its size and shape, it appeared to have belonged to a child, a young girl who had died in that cave somewhere around 76,000 years ago. On its own, a child's finger bone in an ancient cave is not remarkable. People have lived in caves for a very long time. The archaeologists assumed it was either an early modern human or a Neanderthal. They bagged it, labeled it, and crucially sent a tiny piece of it away to a laboratory in Germany for genetic analysis. And that is where this quiet little bone was about to detonate. The laboratory was in Leipzig, Germany, home to some of the world's leading experts in ancient DNA. Scientists who had learned how to extract genetic material from bones that were tens of thousands of years old. They took the finger fragment, drilled out a small sample of powder, and began to read the genetic code preserved inside. They fully expected one of two answers, modern human or Neanderthal. What the machine gave them back was neither. The DNA did not match us. It did not match Neanderthals. It was clearly human, clearly a member of our extended family. But it belonged to a lineage that no one had ever seen before. A group of people that had split off from the others hundreds of thousands of years earlier and gone their own way. In 2010, the team announced it to the world. For the first time in history, a brand new type of ancient human had been discovered, not from a skull, not from a skeleton, but purely from its DNA. They could not name it in the traditional way because they barely had any physical remains to describe. So they named it after the place it was found, the Denisovans, a ghost conjured out of a fragment of a finger. To understand why Denisova Cave is one of the most extraordinary places on Earth, you have to understand what else was found there. Because the Denisovans were not the only humans who called this cave home. In those same layers of ancient dirt, archaeologists also found the remains of Neanderthals, our famous heavy-browed cousins from the West. And in the upper layers, traces of modern humans, Us. Think about that. Over the span of tens of thousands of years, this single cave in Siberia was, at different times, a shelter for three completely different kinds of human being. It was a crossroads of humanity, and these groups did not just pass through in isolation, separated neatly by thousands of years. The evidence shows their times overlapped. Neanderthals and Denisovans were both in the region. Modern humans were spreading in. Three human species, sharing the same landscape, hunting the same animals, sheltering under the same stone roof, breathing the same cold mountain air. We tend to imagine human history as a straight line, one kind of human leading tidally to the next. Denisova Cave shatters that picture. For a long, strange chapter of our past, the world was not lonely. It was crowded. And when different kinds of humans meet, as we are about to see, they do not always keep their distance. So who exactly were the Denisovans? Here is the maddening truth. For years after their discovery, we had almost nothing to go on. A finger bone, a few enormous teeth, molars so large that when the first one was found, researchers assumed it belonged to a cave bear or some other animal, not a human at all. A tiny scrap of arm bone, that was very nearly the entire physical record of an entire species. Imagine trying to describe what a human being looks like, their height, their face, their build, from a pinky and a couple of teeth. It was nearly impossible, and yet their DNA was a treasure chest. From that genetic code, scientists could read things the bones alone could never tell them. They learned that Denisovans were a sister group to the Neanderthals. The two had split from a common ancestor around 400,000 years ago, with Neanderthals heading west into Europe and the Denisovans heading east into Asia. They learned the Denisovans were genetically diverse, suggesting they were not a small doomed band, but a widespread successful population, a people. And they learned that these people had been out there across Asia for an incredibly long time. The ghost was taking shape, but it still had no face. Now we come to the twist that turns this from an interesting scientific footnote into something deeply personally strange. When scientists compared the Denisovan genome to the DNA of people living today, they found something they were not expecting. The Denisovans were not a separate story that ended in that cave. Their genes are still here, walking around, right now, inside living people. It turns out that when modern humans spread out of Africa and across Asia, tens of thousands of years ago, they met the Denisovans. And they did what humans have always done when they meet other humans. They had children together. Those children survived. They had children of their own. And so, generation after generation, little pieces of Denisovan DNA were passed down the long chain of inheritance, all the way to the present day. If you have ancestry from parts of Asia, from New Guinea, from Aboriginal Australia, or from many Pacific islands, then a measurable slice of your genome, in some populations as much as 4 to 6%, comes directly from this vanished species. You are quite literally part Denisovan. The ghost is not just in a museum drawer in Siberia. For millions of people alive today, the ghost is in the mirror. And these inherited fragments are not just dead weight, silent leftovers doing nothing. Some of them are among the most powerful and useful pieces of DNA a human can carry. The most famous example lives in the high mountains of Tibet. The Tibetan plateau is one of the most hostile places on Earth for the human body. So high that the air holds far less oxygen, thin enough to leave lowland visitors gasping, dizzy, and sick with altitude sickness. And yet Tibetans live there, thrive there, work and raise families there, generation after generation, with no trouble at all. For a long time, how they did this was a mystery. Then scientists found the answer written in their genes. Most Tibetans carry a special version of a gene called EPAS1, which fine-tunes how their bodies use oxygen and stops their blood from thickening dangerously in the thin mountain air. And when researchers traced where that remarkable gene came from, the trail led straight back to the Denisovans. A lost species, tens of thousands of years dead, handed the people of the highest plateau on Earth the exact genetic gift they needed to conquer the roof of the world. It is one of the most breathtaking examples of hidden history hiding in plain sight, inside the blood of living people. Tibet is only the beginning. As scientists dug deeper into these inherited Denisovan genes, they found that the ghost species left its fingerprints all over the modern human body, especially in the immune system, the ancient machinery that keeps us alive against disease. Remember, the Denisovans had lived across Asia for hundreds of thousands of years. In all that time, they had been exposed to the local diseases, the local parasites, the local dangers of that vast continent. Their bodies had slowly evolved defenses, so when incoming modern humans, relative newcomers to Asia, mixed with them, they inherited a shortcut, a set of battle-tested immune genes, ready-made, that helped them survive in a new and dangerous land. Some Denisovan gene variants influence how people's immune systems respond to infection to this day. Others appear to affect things like fat storage and metabolism, possibly helping ancient populations survive brutal cold. In New Guinea, researchers have found Denisovan-derived variants that may still be shaping how people fight off tropical disease. Think about what this means. A species that no longer exists is still, thousands of years after its extinction, actively helping to keep human beings alive. Their bodies are gone. Their defenses fight on. Now let me tell you about a single individual, one girl, who died around 90,000 years ago and who may be the most extraordinary human ever discovered. Back in Denisova Cave, researchers analyzed another tiny fragment of bone, a piece no bigger than a fingernail, from a young female, perhaps 13 years old. They nicknamed her Denny. When they read her DNA, they found something almost impossible to believe. Denny was not a Denisovan, and she was not a Neanderthal. She was both. Her mother was a Neanderthal. Her father was a Denisovan. Denny was a first-generation hybrid, the direct child of two different human species captured in a single set of bones. This was staggering. We already knew from our own DNA that these groups had occasionally interbred over the ages. But to actually find the child herself, the living, breathing product of that meeting, a girl with a Neanderthal mother and a Denisovan father, was like winning a scientific lottery with odds of millions to one. Denny is proof, written in bone and blood, that the boundaries between these ancient human groups were blurry and porous. They were not distant strangers. They were close enough, similar enough, and connected enough to fall in love, to have families, and to build a bridge between two species that would echo all the way down to us. For years, one thing about the Denisovans made no sense. All of their confirmed remains came from one cave in the cold mountains of Siberia, and yet their DNA was strongest not in Siberia, but thousands of miles away, in the hot, humid islands of Southeast Asia, in New Guinea and Aboriginal Australia. How could a species known only from a freezing Siberian cave have left its deepest genetic mark in the tropics, on the other side of the continent? The answer is as simple as it is stunning. The Denisovans were everywhere. They were not a small population huddled in one valley. They were a vast, far-flung people, spread across an enormous stretch of Asia, from the frozen north all the way down toward the equator. The Siberian cave was not their home. It was just the one place cold enough to preserve their fragile DNA for tens of thousands of years. In 2019, a jawbone found high on the Tibetan plateau was confirmed to be Denisovan, proving they had already conquered high altitude long ago. Later, a Denisovan molar turned up in a cave in Laos, deep in Southeast Asia. Piece by piece, the map filled in. This ghost species had ranged across half the planet. We had simply been looking for them in the wrong places. And as it turned out, we had been staring at one of their faces for almost a century without knowing it. But before we get to that face, we need to talk about the problem that haunted this entire field of research. For more than a decade after the Denisovans were discovered, scientists knew an astonishing amount about them. And yet they had no idea what they looked like. Think about how strange that is. We could read their genes. We could trace their ancestry back hundreds of thousands of years. We could measure their gift to the people of Tibet. We knew they had crossed a continent. But if a Denisovan had walked past you on the street, you would not have recognized them, because no one on Earth knew what a Denisovan face looked like. There was no skull. Bones survive badly in the warm, wet climates where Denisovans mostly lived. Acid soils dissolve them, Time crushes them to dust. Scientists tried clever tricks, using chemical patterns in the DNA to predict rough features, suggesting a wide skull, a broad face, a large jaw. But it was a sketch drawn in the dark, an educated guess. The ghost had a genome, a family tree, and a legacy in our blood. What it did not have was a face, and a face, it turns out, had been waiting in the most unlikely place imaginable, at the bottom of a well, in China, hidden there on purpose for almost 90 years. To find that face, we have to go back to the year 1933, to the city of Harbin in northeastern China, and to a laborer working on a bridge over the Songhua River. This was a dark and dangerous time. Northeastern China was under brutal occupation by the Japanese army, and while working, this man discovered something remarkable buried in the ground, a massive, heavy, astonishingly complete human skull. He understood two things immediately. First, that it was valuable, and second, that if the occupying soldiers found it, they would take it. So he made a fateful decision. He did not sell it. He did not report it. He took the skull home, wrapped it, and lowered it down into an abandoned well on his family's property to hide it. And there it stayed, hidden in the dark, in the water, at the bottom of a well, through the rest of the occupation, through a world war, through revolution, through the entire second half of the 20th century. The man reportedly told his family about it only near the end of his life. It was not until 2018, 85 years later, that his descendants finally recovered the skull from the well and handed it over to scientists. And what they had been guarding all that time would turn out to be one of the most important human fossils ever found. When scientists finally got their hands on the Harbin skull, they were stunned. It was enormous, one of the largest human skulls ever discovered. It had a brain case as big as our own, capable of holding a brain every bit as large as a modern human's. But the face was different. Massive brow ridges over the eyes, wide cheekbones, huge eye sockets, a broad, low, powerful build. It was unmistakably human, and yet unmistakably not us. It did not match any known species. In 2021, a team of Chinese researchers announced that they believed the skull represented an entirely new species of human, which they named Homo longi, from a word meaning dragon, after the Dragon River region where Harbin sits. The press loved it. Around the world, headlines announced the discovery of Dragon Man, a new human cousin with a face like a warrior and a brain like ours. But other scientists were cautious, even skeptical. A new species is a bold claim, and a nagging question hung over the whole thing. This magnificent skull came from exactly the right time and the right part of the world to be something else, something we had genes for, but no face. Could Dragon Man, this newly named species, actually be the ghost we had been chasing all along? This is where our two mysteries, the faceless genome and the nameless skull, finally collide. To test whether Dragon Man might be a Denisovan, scientists needed to pull biological information out of the skull itself and compare it to the Denisovan genetic code. And in the years that followed, they did exactly that, using cutting-edge techniques that would have seemed like magic a generation ago. First, they studied ancient proteins, molecules that survive in bone far longer than DNA and carry their own faint signature of identity. The proteins from the Harbin skull lined up with Denisovans. Then came the knockout blow. Researchers managed to recover actual genetic material, not from deep inside the bone this time, but from hardened dental plaque and the dense rock of the skull, places where fragile molecules had clung on across the millennia. In 2025, the results were published, and they were as clear as this science ever gets. The Harbin skull, Dragon Man, was a Denisovan. After more than a decade of knowing this ghost only through scraps of finger and tooth, we suddenly had it all. A nearly complete skull, a real, physical head belonging to the very lineage whose DNA we carry. The face that had been missing for 15 years, hidden at the bottom of a Chinese well, was finally, undeniably, the face of a Denisovan. So, after all of this, what did they actually look like? Picture a person built like a tank. The Denisovan of the Harbin skull had a long, low, wide head, with a brain fully the size of ours housed inside it. Over the eyes sat a thick, straight shelf of bone, a heavy brow ridge that would have given the face a serious, powerful, brooding intensity. The eye sockets were large and almost squarish. The cheekbones were broad and set low and flat. The nose was wide. The mouth sat in a big, robust face capable of anchoring powerful chewing muscles. Remember those enormous molars? This was not a delicate creature. This was a large, strong, thick-boned human, clearly adapted to endure harsh environments and harsh winters. And yet, and this is the crucial thing, behind that intimidating, ancient face was a mind housed in a brain as large and as complex as your own. These were not brutish cave monsters from a cartoon. They were intelligent, capable, deeply human people with faces that were strange to us only because we had forgotten they ever existed. When you look at a reconstruction of the Harbin Denisovan, you are looking into the eyes of a lost branch of your own family, and, for millions of people, into the face of a literal ancestor. Now step back and let the full picture sink in, because it is even bigger than one lost species. The Denisovans are just one chapter in a truth that we have only recently come to accept. For almost all of the human story, our planet was home to many kinds of humans at once. There were the Neanderthals, mastering the ice ages of Europe and Western Asia. There were the Denisovans, spread across the east. On the Indonesian island of Flores, there was a tiny species, Homo floresiensis, standing barely more than a meter tall, quickly nicknamed the Hobbits. In the Philippines, on the island of Luzon, yet another small, distinct human species has been found, Homo luzonensis. Deep in a South African cave, the strange, small-brained Homo naledi was laying its dead to rest. And moving among them all, spreading out of Africa, came us, Homo sapiens. For hundreds of thousands of years, Earth was not a planet with one type of human. It was a planet crowded with different humanities, living at the same time, sometimes meeting, sometimes mixing, each with its own body, its own way of life, its own path. The lonely world we live in now, where there is only one kind of human left, is not the normal state of things. It is the strange, recent exception. Which brings us to the darkest and most haunting question of all. If the Earth was once home to so many kinds of humans, then where did they all go? The Neanderthals vanished, the Denisovans vanished, the hobbits of Flores vanished. One by one, over tens of thousands of years, every other kind of human on the planet disappeared until only we were left. Why? There is no single, simple answer, and honest scientists will tell you we do not fully know. Climate almost certainly played a role. The ice ages swung the world between brutal extremes, and populations that were small and specialized could be wiped out by a few bad centuries. Competition mattered too. Different human groups were hunting the same animals, wanting the same caves, drinking from the same rivers. When resources are scarce, being slightly more numerous, or slightly better organized, or slightly more flexible, can decide who survives and who fades away. And modern humans, whatever else you want to say about us, were numerous, adaptable, and relentless. We spread into every landscape we touched. Wherever we arrived, the other humans, sooner or later, were gone. So did we kill them? It is the question everyone wants answered, and the truth is more complicated and stranger than a simple story of war. There is little clear evidence of some grand campaign of extermination, one species hunting another to death. What the DNA tells us is subtler and in a way more intimate. We did not only replace the other humans, we absorbed them. Every time a modern human and a Neanderthal had a child, every time a Denisovan joined a group of incoming Homo sapiens, a little of that other species flowed into ours, and a little of the separate population disappeared into the larger one. Over thousands of years, the smaller, older groups were not just outcompeted. They were slowly folded into us, dissolved into the growing tide of modern humanity, until they no longer existed as separate peoples at all. In a strange and poignant sense, the Neanderthals and Denisovans did not entirely die out. Part of them simply became us. Their extinction and their survival are, weirdly, the same event. They live on, not as themselves, but as fragments woven invisibly through the bodies of billions of people who have no idea they are carrying them. And so here we are, Homo sapiens, the last humans standing. The only surviving twig on a tree that was once thick with branches. We so easily assume that this was inevitable, that we were always destined to be the one kind of human, the crown of creation. But the story of the Denisovans whispers a humbler and more unsettling truth. We are not the goal that all of history was aiming for. We are the survivors of a cull we barely understand, the ones who happened to make it through, carrying pieces of the fallen inside us like heirlooms we never knew we inherited. A fingerbone in a Siberian cave, a skull hidden in a Chinese well, a gene that lets a child breathe on the roof of the world. Fragments of a vanished people scattered across the earth and stitched into our own flesh, patiently waiting tens of thousands of years for us to become clever enough to notice them. The Denisovans were erased from history so completely that we forgot they ever lived. And yet they never fully left. They are still here, in the mountains, in the museums, and in the mirror. The ghost species is us. If this story gave you chills, you are exactly the kind of curious mind this channel is made for. So here is what we would love to know. If scientists could bring one lost kind of human back, the Denisovans, the Neanderthals, the tiny hobbits of Flores, which one would you want to meet, and what is the first question you would ask them? Tell us in the comments. We read them, and the best ones inspire future videos. And if you made it all the way here, do us one small favor. Subscribe to Hidden History Uncovered, hit the notification bell, and share this with the one friend who always says history is boring. Because history is anything but boring when it is hiding inside your own DNA. There are more lost worlds waiting for us to uncover them. We will see you in the next one.